The more that we as a society and a nation can start being more comfortable talking about aging or talking about long-term issues or health issues, the better.
Too many families wait until crisis strikes, a fall, a dementia diagnosis, or that terrifying middle-of-the-night call before realizing they're completely unprepared to care for aging loved ones. It's heartbreaking, chaotic, and costly. But what if planning ahead could bring peace instead of panic? Today's guest, Annalee Krueger, founder of CareRight Inc. and author of The Invisible Patient, has devoted her life to transforming the aging and caregiving journey. She helps families replace fear with clarity, confusion with confidence, and overwhelm with meaningful connection. This episode of the Midland Money Mindset will change the way you think about aging, caregiving, and what it truly means to plan for life's most important moments. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into the show. Well, I have the pleasure today of being with Annalee Krueger, founder of CareRight Inc., and I am so excited because I know this conversation is going to be so helpful to all of you out there. Welcome to the show, Annalee.
Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a lot today about your work through CareRight Inc., but you know, our listeners are enamored by the entrepreneurial journey because many times it's similar, sometimes it's different. But, you know, we like to get a sense of what was your journey like? What was your entrepreneurial journey like up into the point of founding CareRight? And then we'll spend a lot of time talking about what you're doing and what you have done since founding it.
Sure. So my grandparents lived with us growing up on the farm in Iowa. Back in the 70s, there weren't other options like home care, assisted living, memory care, all of those. So my time with falling in love with the seniors and family caregivers started when I was a young child. Then and it was interesting to see my grandparents age so differently, meaning my grandfather, my dad's dad, just needed the socialization. So he would ride the combine with us and hang out with us, where my mother's mother, she needed actual hands-on physical help with her activities of daily living. And so it was very different aging process. So that kind of spun me into thinking, oh, I think I want to work with seniors and their family caregivers. Fast forward, I worked as an activity assistant. Like all I know is senior care. And so I worked as an activity assistant while I was in college and lived with and took care of an elderly woman who needed socialization and some help with her activities of daily living. So I did that while I got my social work degree. And then I spent 22 years in continuing care retirement communities, the ones that have the independent living all the way down through to nursing home and skilled rehab, as a social worker, marketing director, and an admissions director and an executive director. And so part of what happened is every single day, part of my job was to do the tours of the care community. And it was every single day, adult kids coming in because mom was a caregiver to dad. She had a stroke. Dad has dementia. The kids now have two aging parents with two totally different needs. And the kids are like, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do because now mom needs one level of care. Dad needs memory care. We didn't know he was so demented because mom kind of kept that from us. And so the kids had no idea what questions to ask, what to look for when they were coming in to do the tours. The hospital says, here's a list of facilities. Go find one by noon tomorrow because they're discharging. And the kids are like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And so there was so much confusion on how to navigate senior care. They all thought Medicare was going to pay for all expenses. They didn't understand why dad was so demented and why he used to run a bank, but now he can't manage his own medications. You know, and then mom needing skilled rehab because of her stroke. And so then when I would ask the kids, well, what do your parents have in order? Do they have living will, power of attorney, long-term care insurance, VA benefits? The kids were like, I don't know, Annalee, we never have talked about any of this stuff. And then there were like this many, which is like a teeny tiny percentage of families who would say, Annalee, we saw the writing on the wall. We tried to get this information from mom and dad, but they gave us so much pushback and didn't want to talk about this what whens of aging and tell us where they are financially. or tell us, what they have in place for power of attorney. And here we are in crisis mode. So after 22 years, I was like, I think I have a business model here. Families don't talk about the what whens of aging. So A, family meetings. B, they don't understand dementia at all. And you wouldn't when you're in uncharted territory. So dementia education. C, they don't understand how to navigate senior care. They think assisted living is the same as nursing home level of care. So they needed education on levels of care. They don't understand the changes in family dynamics and changes in roles, where now the son is a full-time caregiver and he's trying to give his mother a shower. That doesn't feel very good on either end. And they certainly don't understand end of life. So I educate them about, that's what I did this morning right before this podcast, was walk a family through what to expect as their loved one's body is shutting down and how to give permission and say goodbye. And then the
So
last.
Annalee,
Mhm.
I'm sorry. So it sounds like to me that this entrepreneurial journey that you're on
Yes.
was really born out of a need that you found and looked to fulfill. It wasn't something that you were selling lollipops in grade school,
No.
and it was this journey that you had this deep, dark desire to go on. Is that about
That
right?
is 100% right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of describing this, and it seems like this process of aging that each one of us, that are listening to this or on this are going through, because that's why we're here.
Right.
And, it also seems to be one of those things that people shy away from addressing.
Mhm.
Why is it so important for people to talk about, the what ifs? Because that's where I think a little bit of the uncomfort lies, but it's also important for them to do that.
So one thing is, I used to say the what ifs also when I first started out, and then I was like, when I say the what ifs, I'm only contributing to the massive amount of denial that people already have. So many years ago, I changed it to the what whens of aging, because none of us are going to get stronger, more able-bodied, more mobile, more independent, and more cognizant as we age. So that's one shift I had to make as an entrepreneur, because we already know the biggest obstacles for families is they're in denial. They think their parents are doing better than they really are. They don't realize the amount of extreme overwhelm and work that it is to take care of someone who's elderly. It's one thing to take care of someone who has a broken hip and who will kind of be back on track in 6 to 8 weeks or a few months. But it's one thing to take care of someone who has MS or Alzheimer's disease, where it is a 24/7 job and you're always on alert, high alert. So denial is one thing. Denial also in that they always think they have more time. I hear that every day. Annalee, when we first talked to you for your consult, things were going well. And I said, I know, I told you were in that sweet spot of like, let's plan ahead while you still get along as a family and your loved one can have the best care options. But again, that denial it is so hard to find the magic words to get families to wake up and say, look, we aren't getting healthier. Your parents, if they have dementia, they're never going to get better from that. And so we have to put a plan in place, because at some point you will find yourself in crisis and completely overwhelmed and scared. And then your parents will not have good care options because they'll get whatever they get.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about it really eliminates that whole denial factor. And, along the lines of what you mentioned, the what whens, what advice do you have for those who may be starting to see a cognitive decline in a loved one? And, hopefully they're able to recognize it, because I recognize that, we had a family that we served here for quite a while, and I recognized a little bit of a decline in one of the the family members, the husband in particular, and nobody alerted me to it. And I approached the wife, and the wife was like, yeah, we've been seeing stuff, but I didn't think it was anything, that was out of the normal. What do you think? And I said, well, I'm seeing some signs that, and I don't see him every day, that there's something going on. So how do you recommend that those who are seeing that, possible decline in a loved one, how do they start that conversation?
Yeah. So we talk about, when we talk about even putting a plan in place, mom and dad, what are your goals as you age? They all say they want to age in place at home and not be a burden on their kids. But guess who calls us for a consult? The adult kids, because they're like, look, I've become mom and dad's assisted living. If I wasn't doing what I was doing for them, they would never be able to stay at home. So one way to broach this is, I'm starting to see some red flags that maybe things aren't going very well for dad because he's got some memory impairment. Or, when I talked to dad last week, he said this and it was just like really off base from what we were talking about. Like he wasn't tracking or he just looked confused. So not ignoring those red flags, meaning stop being in denial. Number two, those red flags, in my experience, and even with my own mother who had early onset dementia, that's one of the reasons I became a virtual family caregiver, senior care consultant way back in 2011 when I started my own company, because my own mother had dementia. And some of those red flags are easy to miss when you're not there all the time. So by the time our parents are starting to show some of these signs, it's not like we're still living at home. But when we talk to them on the phone a few times a month, they sound okay because they can cover really well. People with dementia can cover really well for short periods of time. But when you go there and actually spend a day or two or a weekend, then you're like, oh my gosh, things really are not going well. So those red flags, we can't ignore them. And those are weight loss, memory impairment, forgetfulness, changes in their mood, behavior, personality, falls, frequent ER trips or urgent care trips, getting lost when they're driving, dings in the car. So all of these things are red flags that parents are not doing well.
Right. And I would say, I think you would agree that one of those things in it by itself just happening in an isolated incident doesn't indicate there's a problem. But once you start stringing some of those things together, then it's time to potentially have a conversation. Now, me personally, and one of the main reasons I talk about entering the profession I'm in is I watched my dad be a caregiver to my mom throughout her battle with breast cancer. And, you wrote a book, The Invisible Patient, The Emotional, Financial, and Physical Toll on Family Caregivers, How to Plan Ahead and Save Time, Money, and Stress. What was your purpose and what was your goal out of writing that book? What were you trying to accomplish?
Just like when I started Care Right in 2011, I clearly had this incredibly grandiose thought process that I single-handedly could change the whole culture of all families everywhere. Instead of waiting until crisis mode, until they're in the hospital and then trying to figure out what are they going to do for care. I really thought that I could come up with the magic words to empower families to plan ahead. Let's start having these what whens of aging conversations now. And so between that, it was one more effort at trying to reach families wherever they are in the world and wherever they are in this aging or caregiving or dementia journey, to say, look, let's start planning now, because in time things are not going to get better. And plus, in my career, I've worked with over 20,000 families all across the country in every single predicament that you can imagine when it comes to caregiving and aging. And all of these adult kids, because that's who reaches out to me, all of these adult kids are like, Annalee, we love mom and dad so much, but I'm an only child, or I have siblings, but they're not helping out. And I really wish there was a what to do with mom and dad type of book. So I wrote one. And I have to just say, I actually wrote it. It is not AI. So I'm an actual author. It's not a ChatGPT book.
Yeah.
So
so go check it out if you're experiencing this or want to be more prepared for it. Definitely take a look at it. And one of the things you talk about is having, as you call it, a grab and go binder, right? Can you share a little bit about what this is and why families should make assembling one of these a priority?
It is a priority. back when I was still an employee and I was doing these tours with these families, and I would ask them, do your parents have a power of attorney, living will, VA paperwork, anything like that? Do your parents have a financial advisor? I'm sure they do, but I don't know. We've never talked about it. So literally everything that I did to create Care Right was to solve the problem that I saw when I was still an employee working with families thrust into crisis mode and trying to make decisions. So the grab and go is this massive checklist of there's 12 headings, accounts, passwords, business succession plan. What do we do with Fluffy if mom is in the hospital or mom passes away and dad doesn't want the dog? So all things insurance, all things legal, divorce decrees, estate documents, trust documents, emergency section. Who do we call right away if there's a problem? And so there's a VA section, for veterans, there's a VA section, there's a medical section. So an assets section. A lot of my clients have multiple properties. And when they have a stroke, the kids are like, oh, crud, where are all these properties? What are their addresses? Who's the property manager? All of this kind of stuff. Because that's what happens when there's a crisis with your parents and they don't have things buttoned up. The kids waste because they didn't plan. The kids waste or spend so many weeks and months trying to find all of this information. And it's really expensive because if they can't find advance directives or estate documents, guess what? Then they have to redo them and it's now in guardianship or conservatorship. And that's several thousands of dollars. And so the purpose of the grab and go is to be prepared, and funeral arrangements. Let's start getting all of this stuff done now so that when these things happen, everything is at your fingertips and you know that it's updated. And so it saves the families and everybody my clients, the whole family. So I'm doing legacy planning because now the kids are like, oh, I didn't realize it could cost $80,000 or $90,000 a month for mom and dad to stay at home with 24/7 care. We better find a financial planner, or we better get long-term care insurance or some sort of solution to help offset the cost of senior care.
Yeah, that grab and go binder concept is so critical and important. And we maintain a lot of the documents for the families we serve. And like you said, financial advisor, we try to be the third call for those families. Mm-hmm. First call is typically, if something went awry, really bad for the family, death or disability, first call is faith typically. Yeah. Second call is family, maybe reverse that too from time to time, depending upon the person. Mm-hmm. And then the third call, we want to be that third call. We want to be the financial advisor, and we want to be that third call to that family. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important. And, making that grab and go binder is really helpful to making sure, like you said, making that process easier. And, beyond just the documents, right? I think the documents are one part of that equation, mm-hmm. but I think it's also important to have conversations with your loved ones about your wishes. Why is that so important as well, to kind of get the full narrative, I think, than just what the documents are saying, right?
That's the part two, right? So let's first compile the grab. And this is all part of an aging plan that we do. This is just part of it. But it's important to, when we work with families, we basically become that project manager for the grab and go section anyway. What heading do you want to start with first? What pace do you want to go to get this done? Now, if you just got diagnosed with, stage 4 breast cancer, we have to expedite this because they don't have much time. But, the plan is that the whole family works together to get this. Like this month, we're going to all do estate documents. Next month, we're doing funeral arrangements and get that out of the way because everybody's all squeamish about that. But the reality is it's not just for mom and dad who are in their 80s or 90s, because one of the most frequent questions is, Annalee, when should we start having these conversations? When should we start getting everything together? And I always say like yesterday, because all the people who had major strokes last Thursday didn't wake up thinking, oh, I think I'm going to have a major stroke today. And so there's a lot of things that are terrible, but one thing that is terrible is when you're in the throes of crisis and you have to make really big decisions and you don't know what documents are in order. And then the second piece, they've never talked about it. That's a mistake that families make. Just because you have your documents in order, now the next step is you have to train or educate in service whoever it is you named as your healthcare power of attorney and say, look, Lucy, daughter Lucy, this is what I want, this is what I don't want if I can't make my own decisions, or if I'm not lucid. And then the same is true. We have to in-service the financial power of attorney and say, okay, Lucy, if it's the same person because she's an only child or she's the only responsible one of the children, here's my financial advisor, and I encourage that they meet. um, but also, here's my accounts, here's my passwords, here's my properties, here's the property manager, here's which bills come out of which account, here's which ones are set up on auto pay. Here, you have to in service, and you have to have these conversations on a regular basis so it becomes muscle memory, so that if, God forbid, mom has a stroke or dad has a stroke and he can't share this information anymore, you've had enough conversations that it's like muscle memory. You're like, oh, I got to get on the call with Larry because mom had a stroke, so this way
Yeah.
it becomes habit and routine, and they know exactly what to do when things happen. And it's still going to be overwhelming and scary, but a heck of a lot less so if you don't now have to miss 3 weeks of work because you're looking for that box that mom talked about that's somewhere in the attic that
Right.
has all this in
Or
it.
you're trying to figure out what their wishes were because you've had those conversations, which are fantastic. Let's pause for a moment. What actually brings you joy? It's something most people never think about, yet it shapes how your life unfolds. You're busy. You make responsible choices. You even plan ahead. But have you slowed down long enough to ask if what you're building supports a life you enjoy living? That's the reason I built my YouTube channel, to help you bring more joy to your money journey. Sure, we'll talk about all the essentials, but my real goal is to help you connect your finances with what brings you joy, because money is the tool that funds the moments that matter. If you want to explore that connection more deeply, visit my YouTube channel at Larry Sprung. I know this isn't necessarily your wheelhouse per se, or your target market to some degree. But speaking of documents, one of the things we talk to the families we serve about is the importance of some of these documents you're talking about, power of attorney and
Mhm.
healthcare proxy, even when their children turn 18,
Yes.
right? How do you think we can help people understand that these estate documents, as you mentioned before, aren't just for grandma and grandpa? Because if they have these at an early age, like 18,
Mhm.
granted, things can and will change over
Right.
time and they might need to update them. But starting that process early, I would imagine, makes your life easier and more helpful if they're starting these things so early in
It
life,
sure
no?
would. It sure would make it a lot easier. But the problem is this, that so many even healthcare professionals, and I'm sorry, but financial professionals too, we're all people, right? And so everybody is so skittish about bringing up these, what they perceive as uncomfortable topics. So if they don't bring it up, if their professionals don't bring it up, then that's going to make the fallout happen to the client, right? And so the more
Mhm.
that we as a society and a nation can start being more comfortable talking about aging or talking about long-term issues or health issues, the better. And that's why the grab and go that I created is for anyone over the age of 18, because you're right, college kids, if they get drunk and they die or get hit by drunk drivers, everybody needs to have their documents in order so that it becomes more normal, and to have these conversations, but also so that things are buttoned up. So, for example, even in my own personal life, I practice what I preach. So that's a good thing. But when I turned 40, 4 days after my 40th birthday, I had just returned from China from a national speaking engagement. And I was in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, helping an 82-year-old across the street because I was there on business, and I was walking to my next appointment, and I encountered this gentleman, and I'm from Iowa. We're friendly folks. And so I'm like, hi, how are you? And so he started telling me about his health issues. And so I'm like, well, let me help you get across the street, and then you can get to your car and drive back to Chicago or wherever he was going. So he's telling me all about his health issues. And lo and behold, right when we are starting to cross the street, when the light turned so that we could cross the street, he yells, watch out. And the school bus driver, who was distracted by the kids on the bus, was looking through the internal mirror instead of through
Oh
the
boy.
windshield. And so she blew through a four-corner stop, and she did not apply the brakes until she saw my face break the headlight of the school
Oh.
bus. So I practice what I preach. I carry my living will. I carry my
Mm.
my healthcare power of attorney and my DNR, my do not resuscitate. And I have at least annual conversations with my power of attorney, my siblings, about these are my wishes. Remember, and they're like, yeah, we know. And I'm like, well, one of these days you're going to get a call, and then you're going to be thanking me that we have these conversations. But thankfully, I didn't lose consciousness, but you never know. I could have had a
Sure.
subdural hematoma, and so I carry them with me. So I pulled them out of my backpack and gave them to the paramedics. And she's like, "Wow, I wish everyone had these documents. It would make their life easier." And I said, "Well, I do crisis management for a living, and life is good until that split second when it's not,
That's
and
true.
I don't want to be vulnerable."
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're
Me
okay,
too.
and thank you for sharing that with
It's
us.
sort of back on track.
Yeah, it's also like no good deed goes
I
unpunished.
say
It's
that too.
another yet example. But
Mhm.
one other thing. So on the grandparents topic, I think one of the things that people underestimate, and you kind of alluded or mentioned it earlier, is the cost of care.
Yeah.
Right, very expensive, but depending on the levels, et cetera, it can range widely.
Yep.
What's the best way for families to, actually keep the cost of care in mind as they plan? How should they be approaching
Well,
that?
ideally, they have what we do, which is an aging plan. So, or it realistically becomes a crisis plan. And that's when families find out how expensive staying at home really is and what the downsides and the consequences can be of trying to age in place at home. Because they often assume that someone else is paying the bill, or they don't realize how expensive home care is. And so when they realize, oh, well, mom wants to age in place at home, and that which means you die at home, right? And we don't get healthier as we age. So we know that most of us are going to need 24/7 care. I was just talking to another client this morning, and he said, we calculated how much it's going to cost. They want two actual nurses with their parents at all times, and it's going to be $1.3 million in a year. And
Wow.
so if you take that down to just companions, that's anywhere from, it's like a certified nursing assistant, someone who's not a nurse, but someone who's quasi trained in keeping
Mhm.
people at home. It's still going to run anywhere from 25,000 a month and up. So if you need two companions because mom needs two, she's a two-person transfer, or you have two aging parents. Dad is 6'4", mom is short and small, but she's got dementia and she's wandering around and sundowning all day. You're going to need two caregivers at least, and that's how it can add up really quickly. So, what I would say is families, you can't assume that someone else is paying the bill. The bill is going to be on your parents. And if they didn't plan for that, or if their advisor, their professional didn't properly plan for that as well, or they didn't comply with what the advisor recommended, then it's very expensive, and not everybody can afford to do that. So when they realize how expensive care is at home, then they're like, oh, I don't think we can age in place at home, and that's why we work with them, so they can make informed decisions, so that they don't go through their whole nest egg trying to stay at home and then realize, oh, dad is only in year eight of a 30-year dementia diagnosis, and now he doesn't financially qualify to get into a care facility because they spent all their money trying to stay at home. So this way we can talk with the families about, we actually do what's called a care matrix. And that way it outlines current and future care needs, actual costs. So then we can reverse engineer and say, okay, well, if these facilities require that you move into independent living level of care because that's their business model, then you might want to think about moving sooner rather than later. Otherwise, you're not going to get into these different care communities. Or if you have, if you have to have 3 years of private pay or $4 million in net worth to financially qualify, now we can reverse engineer and say, okay, well, what is
Right.
going to be your aging in place at home care budget and the safety
Yeah.
triggers, not only financial, but like how safe is mom and dad actually at home?
Yeah, having a plan is so key.
Hmm.
And I want to gear this towards the business owners that are listening, or the entrepreneurs. As a business, your personal grab and go binder has more than people might imagine, because
Hmm.
it's more complicated, right? You have to have succession planning, maybe a corporate attorney,
Yep.
other critical information. So for the business owners and entrepreneurs out there, why is it even more vitally important, for them to have all these documents in stored in one place?
So as entrepreneurs, it's so important to protect your business. I mean, thank God I didn't get brain damage or anything like that. I was laid up for a year, but I already had two businesses when I got hit by the school bus. But because I have regular family meetings and my family, my power of attorney has a digital copy of my grab and go. They know who my corporate attorney is. They know who my corporate financial planner is. They know my corporate life insurance plan. They have all of that at their fingertips. And we talk about it because if you don't want your own family to be vulnerable or have to spend so much time and effort and money and anxiety and fear trying to figure out where are things at with a business, who even works there, like so that's the challenging part. And just as an entrepreneur, as a side note too, like make sure that you have the emergency contact of all of your employees and your teammates, because something could happen to them too. And at least then you're like, okay, where's Martha? She's not responding to email or whatever. So then you can call and get the emergency contact and say, okay, is everything okay?
Yeah, great points. And thank you for sharing that. And Annalee, we're all about joy on the Midland Money Mindset. And I think having this stuff in order and having the grab and go, should bring people joy, knowing that they have that all ready to go. But we also ask each of our guests the same final question about joy, and that
Hmm.
is, what did you do today that brought you
Oh,
joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
lots of things. So as an entrepreneur, it's easy, especially in my line of work, it's all crisis, right? No one calls me because things are going well. So every call except a podcast is usually pretty emotionally heavy because someone just had a stroke, someone's caregiver just died. So, something has happened that has triggered a family to reach out. So as an entrepreneur, and it took me a while to get this ritual, I would say, or routine down
Mm-hmm.
pat. But I safeguard my mornings. So I get up at 6:30. I walk my dogs. I spend time with my dogs. I play with them. We get the zoomies done. Then I sit outside in the backyard. I'm in Florida, so right this time of year, it's really nice. And I watch I have a butterfly garden. I feed the birds, although because we're not supposed to with the HOA. So I have birds and squirrels. And so to me, as a previous farm kid, that's the stuff that keeps me grounded and I can just breathe. I have my whole backyard is just a beautiful sanctuary of beautiful trees and plants and animals and stuff. So that's what I do every single day, because if you start saying, oh, I don't have time today, so I'll have to do it tomorrow, but then tomorrow is just as busy, right? So as entrepreneurs, for self-care, because that's what we're really talking about, you have to find what works for you and the routine and schedule that works for you. And honestly too, kind of set boundaries. you know you kind of have to set boundaries and say, you know what, until 10 o'clock I'm offline, I don't respond to emails. Set up a system so that maybe in your email it says, our office hours or whatever they are, and we respond within that time frame.
Well, what a great way to start off the day, and be able to safeguard that time so that you can lean in and be completely present for those that might be in crisis mode or probably in crisis mode,
Hmm.
and need your full attention. So that amazing way to start off the day. Now, Annalee, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes for you and Care Right. But if people want to learn more about what you do, or learn more about you, or connect with you, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do
Go
that?
straight to the Care Right Inc. website. So carerightinc.com website. You can have all of my different, I have several businesses, but they all lead back to planning or crisis
Okay.
management. And so the easiest way is just to reach out to me through my Care Right Inc. website. There's a contact us form, or you can schedule a consult, or you can find me on LinkedIn under Annalee Krueger. I'm on LinkedIn every day, post a couple times a week. So everything I do is to educate families so that when these things happen, or advisors and professionals, so when these situations happen with their families, they're like, oh, Annalee is who we need to reach out to.
Awesome. Well, thank you for
Thank you.
taking out time to share with our listeners today. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
I sure will. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Annalee, thank you for joining us and sharing your incredible insight on caregiving, aging, and the importance of planning with heart and purpose. Your passion for helping families find peace, clarity, and connection through life's toughest transitions is truly inspiring. Conversations like this remind us that preparing today isn't just smart, it's an act of love. Annalee Krueger and Care Right Inc. can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.